Hello everyone, I am the Lore Explorer and this is Outer Wilds, an amazing open world exploration game in which you explore a solar system full of puzzles. But this mini solar system just got shaken up a bit. Outer Wilds just got a new update along with a new visitor in the form of a brand new DLC for Outer Wilds. I saw a lot of apprehension on whether or not this DLC was a good idea for the series, or whether or not they could add something substantial to the game without belittling the story already told. In this video, I'm going to address those exact feelings and give everyone my impressions on it after having played the game for a handful of hours. If you want the Cliff Notes version of it, so you get absolutely nothing spoiled in the DLC, I'm not joking when I say this feels like I launched Outer Wilds for the first time. It feels like they packed an entire solar system's worth of experiences into one single adventure, and I think it's absolutely worth experiencing it for yourself. So if you were on the fence about whether or not to buy Echoes of the Eye, then I suggest you give it a shot for yourself. From here, there will only be minor spoilers that you can infer from the context of the video, but let's dive into it. First, I want to touch on something that I was honestly deathly afraid of. I was super worried about what they were going to change in the main game to introduce us to this new adventure. I was afraid that they were going to have to retcon a bunch of details to make everything just fit in and make sense, which means that new players would experience something different from the base game that I experienced. But as far as I can tell, that's just not the case. They seem to have set it up organically in a way that's separate from the story already told. And they even went out of their way to never mention Echoes of the Eye, or the fact that you can go buy it. Or at least I haven't seen it yet, and I went into the updated version with no DLC to check. They didn't just plop in a new location and have it serve as an ad for the DLC. They only added stuff to the game that would make sense to have always been there. An incomplete exhibit to the museum, a satellite, and a Deep Space Network radio tower that are the satellite and the radio tower are responsible for our map. Like, it all makes sense. Then they actually came up with a good lore excuse as to why the tower is closed if you don't have the DLC. Apparently, Slate and Micah got up to some mischief and decided it'd be a good idea to do an unauthorized test flight of a model rocket at the Deep Space Radio Tower, so it got a bit burned up. That's something I could definitely see happening and makes total sense in-universe. I think it's awesome how they handled it. They didn't change the main story just to make the DLC fit or anything like that. We will just have to give them a pass on consecutive loops being different if you buy the DLC, and how that creates the illusion of time progressing in the Outer Wilds universe, but they earned the pass. Next, I suppose we should talk about the easy one, the thing that people were worried about the least. One of the first things I noticed when the adventure started to get romantic was the music welling up and seemingly cheering me on. While music is something I usually ignore in video games for the most part, I couldn't help but just stop for a minute and just listen to the new audio. And of course, it isn't just the music. With the new DLC comes a new, more dark horror aspect to Outer Wilds. The horror, which we will talk about more in a bit. But here, I think Andrew Pralo, the composer, shines through. I run into things I'm sure most people would be terrified of, yet when I'm walking into a new room with that eerie music playing in the background is when I'm most tense. They really did an amazing job that honestly lives up to my expectations. Which sort of touches on one of the things I think people were worrying about the most in Outer Wilds, which is really integral: expectations. We have to have no absolute clue as to what's going to happen next. The ending to the main game throws you for such a loop that it kind of felt like they'd never be able to match something like that. But I can tell you right now, sitting here, not only can I not tell you what's going to happen at the end of the DLC, I'm not even sure I understand what has already happened. There is so much going on, it's hard to even piece together everything, and I definitely need the ship log to help me through it. And even when I sit down and think about what I've already seen, I'm left scratching my head. This DLC has set up a mystery for us that I feel matches the one told by the main game, as hard as that sounds to believe. And of course, it sets up a fun and interesting story with a brand new scenario. We are no longer flying around the solar system to explore multiple planets, but they have come up with a new interesting mechanic for us to move around with. You're still able to fly around with your jetpack, so that mechanic is gonna be familiar, but they were able to add a new mode of travel that's pretty cool and unique. I've already had a few goofs and gaffs with it, and it's a semi-dangerous form of travel, so it just all brings the same sense of the main game. Now, there is one thing in the DLC that's undeniably different from the main game, the horror aspect of it. And if you watch my gameplay, you'll see I'm very tense at times. It is pretty scary, but honestly, it doesn't feel all that different from the main game. At the current time, I'm not being chased by ghosts or ghouls, no one is trying to break my neck or legs or anything creepy. It's still early for me, but from what I've experienced, it's more situational horror. I'm sure it's more creepy to a lot of people, but to me, there is nothing that is too out of the ordinary for Outer Wilds. I mean, when you think about the base game, it's pretty crazy to begin with. In a certain sense, we are already used to a lot of what we experience in the DLC. Now, I'm being honest here. I was terrified that I wouldn't be into the story or even the DLC at all of Echoes of the Eye because it was supposed to be horror. And I found myself pleasantly surprised at how little of it seems to be horror and how the stuff that could be considered horror isn't too out of the reach for the base of Outer Wilds. This feels like something that could have been released with the main game and would have felt pretty at home. Sadly, I can't get too much deeper into it without being too spoilery, so I think it's best for this community if I leave this video short and pretty simple. Really, the DLC is something I was afraid that was going to feel like a last-minute contribution to the game simply because Mobius didn't know what else to do. But thankfully, I was wrong, and it feels more like something they wanted to add into the main game ever since the beginning. I see just as much passion and creative storytelling in the DLC as I do in the base game. So a huge hats off and thank you to Mobius Digital for not disappointing me. And if my experience is anything to judge by, the community probably feels the same. If you liked the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing here. And if you'd like to support me more directly, you can become a member here on the channel. This unlocks access to my backlog of live streams and gives you little perks like badges. Plus, it helps the channel grow. As usual, a special thank you to the members here on the channel. I'm sure most members here don't need me to tell them to go buy Echoes of the Eye, but I appreciate them nonetheless. As always, this is the Lore Explorer, very excited to try to solve this grand mystery presented to us. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.